Thank you all for joining our committee meeting tonight. We have two presentations, one from DDC and one from DSNY, both really special topics to me, so looking forward to hearing more about it. So first off, let's hear from DDC.
Thanks so much, Angelica, and hello to everyone here from the committee. My name is Sapna Advani, and I'm from Grain Collective. We're part of the design team led by NV5, and we're supporting with community engagement on the project. And some of you might already know this, but we just had a public meeting for this project last week on October 14th, where we shared some of the content that you'll be seeing today. Much of the information that we're sharing today can also be found on the project website. You can also use the website and the email listed there as a way to share your feedback and go back and look at the materials in detail after today as well. And then we also just wanted to take a moment to recognize the date today and that we're less than 2 weeks away from the anniversary of Sandy and the significance that holds for the Red Hook community. So moving into the program, another thing to share is that you'll be hearing from a couple of different presenters. As you will see in the agenda shortly, they will talk about the project overview and details, including the schedule, the funding, etc., as well as a proposed design. There's going to be multiple opportunities to ask questions. You can also use the chat box to share your feedback as you see various slides during the presentation. We're documenting all the feedback and the questions from today to share with the project team, including NV5, the design engineers, DDC, the Department of Design and Construction, the Mayor's Office of Climate Resiliency, and the numerous city agency members, some of whom might be attending the meeting today. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Q from DDC.
Thanks, Sapna. Hi, everybody. Thank you, CV6 members, Angelica, and other committee members for having us tonight. We're excited to join you all tonight, and this is the first of many meetings to come. We have a very, very exciting and essential project at hand that we're designing right now. I wanted to give you folks a status update and walk through the 30% design level of the proposed design that we have so far. I do want to preemptively highlight that the materials that you're seeing, as Sapna mentioned, we had a meeting, a large community meeting last Thursday that we presented to the community members or the public, and great turnout. Thank you to those who joined us and were there and made the time to be there. This is just a 30% design level, essentially the conceptual skeleton of the project. And we haven't reached the point of developing a lot of the urban design details that includes the trees and the details of the intersections and sidewalks and elements like that. So ask that folks bear with us and be patient. Hopefully sometime after January, we'll be kicking off the 60%. By the end of this year, going into January, we'll kick off the 60% design phase, and that's when our design engineers start developing those details. So more to come. Again, this is the first meeting of many to follow. As Sapna mentioned, the agenda up on the screen. I'll go over some Fema requirements and criteria that we need to comply with and do an overview there, and then go into our project timeline and some community engagement efforts that we've done to date. And after that, I'll hand it off to our lead design engineer, Joe Menzer from NV5 Engineering, to walk us through the project proposed design materials that we have so far for tonight. This is a condensed version of what we showed last week to the community. In the interest of time, we took out a lot of the slides. Last week, the deck was about over 80 slides. So we took almost half of that out and put it in the appendix. These materials are all available on our website. The larger deck from last week, it's up on the website and also in the appendix of this deck. So we won't be missing anything, but we just wanted to get through the essentials and the important pieces because of tonight's sort of a shorter period of meeting and be respectful of everybody's time. So with that, let's dive in and we'll take questions at the end of this presentation. So just to give a little background for those who are not familiar with this project, this is a coastal resiliency project. This is specifically a flood protection system that's designed to reduce the coastal flood risks of the waterfront, Red Hook waterfront community. It's broken into two sections. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes, but it's different from other projects and construction projects that are happening right now in the neighborhood. We're still in early stages of design. We haven't broken ground to the construction phase yet, and I'll walk through the design to the project schedule in a few minutes. But the inception of this project, it was created in response to the devastation and damage that was caused by Hurricane Sandy. Pretty much everybody in this room is no stranger to all that. We don't need to relive all that, but the unfortunate outcome of that led to this and many other coastal projects that we have right now that we're designing. Again, the goal is to provide sort of a defensive flood protection system from coastal storm surge. And like I said, we're at 30% level design right now, and we'll come back with more details as we move along. Quick overview of our project team and our project partners. On the left side is a short list of the city agencies that are involved in our resiliency projects. The project is being led by the Mayor's Office of Climate Resiliency, MOCR, and implemented for design and construction by our agency, New York City DDC, the Department of Design and Construction. And on that note, apologies, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Q Amiri from the Department of Design and Construction, the Coastal Resiliency Unit and Infrastructure Division. And I work closely with multiple units within DDC and multiple colleagues and units within all the other agencies that you see here on the screen. Obviously, so since this project is funded partially by Fema, we have to closely coordinate this with state and federal agencies, our counterparts. And on the right side, you see the design team listed there. The lead consultant consultant team is MV5 Engineering with their sub-consultants listed. We have 4 CBOs that we partnered with to help us with engagement and outreach throughout this project: Ready, SBIDC, Aesthetic Soul, and Red Hook Art Project. And also tightly coordinated with other sister agencies and organizations like NYCHA, Port Authority, and we've had design coordination meetings with multiple property owners like Mr. O'Connell's group, Thor and Amazon, UPS, IKEA, and those meetings will continue throughout this design phase. This is the slide that is a sort of an overview. It's a very, very simplified version of the reality. It's an overview of the FEMA phases and requirements and the process that we go through because of our FEMA funding commitments and obligations that we have. So this project started off as a feasibility study a number of years ago. It was led by the Mayor's Office and Dewberry Engineering, if you folks remember, if any of you were involved back then. That feasibility study, a lot of great feedback and community workshops came from that process. And it led to a final report that after FEMA review, it was approved to move on into a capital projects that we received at DDC that we're designing today. You see the highlighted yellow box in the middle. That's where we are in the design phase. Design phase is broken into multiple different milestones. I'll show in the next couple slides. Every milestone is reviewed by FEMA to make sure that we're all on the same page and we're complying with the requirements that they look for. And we move forward towards the end of design to hopefully have FEMA's approval before we break ground for construction. And you see the funding amounts down below. There was $4 million for the feasibility study. That was a successful sort of first chapter of this whole process. And we have $100 million for this capital project right now. 50 million is from FEMA funds, and the other 50 million is a local match from New York City funds. This is a very, very short list of the eligibility criteria from FEMA that we need to comply with. I won't bore you with the details, but just to highlight a few important ones. The flood protection system for the coastal storm surge protection that we're designing, it must be an independent system, and it can't depend on other projects or other organizations or structures out there. It needs to fully function independently on its own. And also it can't have a negative impact on existing conditions in the neighborhood or worsen the flooding in the neighborhood or nearby locations. Also, it has to be a permanent system. No temporary measures or components could be part of this project. There is a temporary flood protection system that recently just got installed by our partner agencies, New York City Emergency Management, and that will stay in place until this project goes under construction and is implemented. And also an important criteria that we need to meet is that the city, as the owner and operator of this system, we need to be able to fully access and operate and maintain this protection system throughout the life of the structure, so we can make sure emergency activations, routine inspections, any repairs, all of that is handled and managed smoothly. This is a slide that we tried to show how the FEMA criteria is sort of stitched together with the community priorities and the project priorities. A lot of these points were takeaways from the feasibility study workshops that were done several years ago. Like I said, we received all those materials, went through all the reports and the results of that. And we pulled out the priorities and the feedback that we got, the city received from the community, and put it together side by side with the FEMA criteria, and that became the guiding point for this project. For example, one of our main criteria is to maintain waterfront access. Red Hook, as you all know, Red Hook has a working waterfront with many businesses and industrial entities that need to maintain that access in addition to the residents' use and access. So we have to make sure that we're not obstructing that and preserving the neighborhood character. There will be some temporary construction impacts when we go into construction in a couple of years, but our goal is, as standard practice, to minimize those construction impacts as much as possible. Long-term operations and maintenance needs must be met. So there's a lot of points here that I wanted to share how we brought these together with the FEMA requirements. I see a lot of questions coming in. I'll take a look at those after these slides, and we'll get to it towards the end. This is our project timeline. It's fairly complicated, and believe it or not, this is a simplified version of the schedule and timeline that we have that we work with. So for presentation purposes only, but I'll go through some of the highlights. Starting on the top, you see these vertical blue lines and blue font here. We kicked off the project early last year, 2020. Just before the pandemic. Shortly after the pandemic started, we went into a temporary pause for a few months, and we were able to pick up the project back up again. There haven't been any significant time impacts or any funding impacts to our project. Our funding is fully committed and available for this project, so we're moving ahead as previously planned. The middle part is where we are, the yellow dashed highlight. This is, again, a 30% design level, and I'll go through the rest of the milestones in a minute. But we just, like I said, we had a presentation to the larger community. We're here presenting to the community CB6 committee for feedback, and at the same time, just submitted to FEMA for their review and their feedback. So all of these happen at the same time. And within the next month or two, we're hoping to wrap up all of this to be able to move into the next phase. On the right of this page, where hopefully you see my cursor circling around, we're anticipating to finish our design phase by the end of next year, sometime late next year, before the end of 2023. I'm sorry, 2023, not next year, in a year and a half to 2 years time, 2023. So after that, late 2023 final design is submitted. It goes to Fema for their review and approval. And that's when we initiate our procurement process. Procurements typically for these large infrastructure projects take several months, could be anywhere between 7 to 9 months on average. And once we go through that, and part of that entails releasing a bid for the contractors out there to submit their bids, and reviewing that and selecting the contractor, having an onboarding process. There's a lot that goes into it before we have literally shovels in the ground. So even day one of construction, which we're anticipating to be about early 2024, for community purposes, day one of construction has a different definition than day one of construction for our purposes. There's a lot of legwork that happens before that, before contractors show up with fences and trucks and equipment. So we'll be sure to keep everybody updated way in advance of all that. And we're anticipating for construction to take about 2 years. So sometime around early 2024 until about 2026, in that 2-year time frame is what we're anticipating the construction phase to be. The middle bar, the middle blue ribbon here is our design timeline. We're currently at 30%. We have 60, 90, and 100% design milestones coming up after this. Again, each one of them require FEMA review. Of course, it requires community review and CV6 review. So all of them would come up in the next year or two. On the top of the blue ribbon, you'll see Public Design Commission. That's the typical process for design review with most of our city projects, and that will start early next year. We'll submit a package to the Public Design Commission for their review and feedback, and there will be another one towards the end of design, final design. And then the green bar is also our environmental analysis bar. Right now, we're wrapping up the existing conditions of environmental analysis, and soon after that, we'll start the environmental, the next steps of the environmental analysis. We don't have any details on that. I know a lot of folks are really interested and anxious to hear more about that. At this point, we're not really anticipating significant impacts as a result, environmental impacts. But again, these details haven't been developed yet. Once we hit 60% design and the project is more developed and we have a better understanding of what exactly is being constructed, that's when the environmental information becomes available. And on the bottom part of this slide, you'll see some bubbles, lighter blue color, that's the community engagement timeline. Of course, as standard practice, community engagement starts from day one of our projects all the way to the last day of construction. There won't be any interruption. There will be momentary pause between design and construction during procurement, but we have, this is what you're seeing, these bubbles and circles is for the design phase right now, that we just successfully implemented conducted our session 2 of community engagement that we showed the 30% design. Session 1 was earlier last year. That was a kickoff session, and we'll have 2 more large community work sessions in the next couple of years with smaller meetings in between, such as community board 6 presentations and stakeholder one-on-one stakeholder meetings as needed, and of course the elected officials we meet with them regularly to give them status briefings. So all of that happens between these large public meetings, and hopefully by then, in the next few months, we'll be able to have all this in person. Take a break from the Zoom life. This slide is a simplified, watered down version of the previous one. Again, we have 4 major milestones: 30%, 60, 90, and 100% design milestones. Every one of these submissions go to FEMA for review. Every one of them, we come back to the community with a more developed package as we move forwards for feedback. And the top one is where we are today with community and CV6 presentations. And I moved, so the next slide was at the end of the presentation for last week, but I moved it up for tonight's for time efficiency purposes. After we're done with 30%, you'll see, like I mentioned before, we'll start our public design commission process, continue community meetings and the CV6 meetings. We go into final for pre-construction submission. The 90% milestone is where we want to have the final presentation and final materials out to the public and to the CV committee here to make sure we have a little time left after that to implement any tweaks or adjustments if we need to before we issue the final 100%. And the 100% presentation and design materials will be available at that point for folks to look at. Once we do the 100% submission, goes to Fema. Hopefully they'll review and give us the green light to go into construction. The bottom orange piece, like I mentioned earlier, is the procurement part before construction that we go out to bid advertisements and contracts. The contractor gets selected and awarded, and then their contract and their funds have to be registered before we're able to move into the other pre-construction tasks. At that point, we'll have regular updates to the community, and once we get closer to breaking ground, shovels in the ground, we'll have a month or two advance notices to everybody out in the community for any construction closures, detours, fencing going up, the smallest little impact to the day-to-day life of the neighborhood. All of that will be announced in advance, way ahead before anything happens. On this slide, I'll just quickly go through the bottom piece of the slides just to show everybody what we've been up to so far. Like I said, we kicked it off early 2020. Earlier this year, 2021, we had a round of introductory briefings with key elected officials and some stakeholders that are listed there. Shortly after that, we had design coordination meetings with organizations and property owners to loop everybody in and make sure that everybody's aware of our plan, we're aware of everybody else's construction and potential projects that they have either going on right now or in the pipeline. We had great meetings with Mr. O'Connell's group, with Thor and Amazon, UPS and IKEA. We had a really good understanding of where UPS is with their project, and Amazon and Thor as well. And I'll touch on that in a second. And also this past September, a month ago, we had meetings with design briefings with the elected officials and some key stakeholders again, to give them a preview of what's being shown tonight and what was shown last week at the public meeting. And just make sure we're constantly, regularly keeping everybody in the loop. October 2021 is where we are today. Capital projects design session was last week, and here we are with our presentation to the committee here. This is my last slide before I hand it off to our design engineer, Joe. I'll take a couple minutes here. So on this slide, we tried to summarize the top reoccurring concerns and questions that we've been receiving from community members, from stakeholders or elected officials. Typically, these all come through either meetings like tonight or direct emails, correspondence. So this slide would get updated throughout the project as we move along, and we'll be sure to highlight these questions that we receive and hopefully every time have a response for everybody. So starting from the top, folks have been asking us what happened to all the feedback and input that they provided during the feasibility study to the city back several years ago. And like I mentioned earlier, all of that was taken into account, handed to us at DDC in the form of a report that's publicly available. And that's what set the guiding points and the guiding path for this project. And I showed that in a few slides back. We also received questions on COVID impacts. I addressed that earlier in the schedule slide. We haven't had any significant impacts from the pandemic, and luckily our project, since it's considered essential project, we have our funding committed, and we're moving along as we have planned. We've also been asked to coordinate with other projects that are happening out there in the neighborhood, and that either are happening right now or are in the pipeline that are coming up, like NYCHA, for example, or other construction impacts currently out there, which happy to report we've been doing that. That's sort of standard practice for our projects, and we'll continue to do that on a regular basis to make sure that each party on each side we're keeping each other updated and in the loop of our progress and developments. And on the note of NYCHA, I also wanted to highlight that this project is a separate project from the NYCHA resiliency upgrades that you folks are seeing out in the community today. Both projects, the goal and mission of both projects is obviously resiliency upgrades and better improving the conditions of the neighborhood. But the NYCHA project is being specifically managed and constructed by NYCHA within the grounds of NYCHA, and our project is outside of NYCHA property in the larger neighborhood. We are an infrastructure upgrade project, to put it simply, and the NYCHA is a building level project. The two obviously go hand in hand and complement each other, and that's one of the greatest advantages that we have right now in Red Hook, that these projects are happening sort of back to back with many other things that are out there with DOBs, for example, building level requirements for resiliency and flood protection. So just wanted to clarify that for everybody's reference. And if you have questions on NYCHA, feel free to reach out to them directly. If you come to us, we'll obviously put you in contact with our NYCHA colleagues, Onel and everybody else. The next bullet, I do want to take a minute to acknowledge last mile delivery and distribution centers. Of course, this is a major concern for the community, and we certainly share that frustration and recognize that. We wanted to clarify also that the last mile delivery and the distribution centers is independent from our project, and our project is independent from theirs. We're designing and building this project in a way that would not have any impacts on any potential traffic increase that the distribution centers would have, outside of the temporary construction impacts that obviously we will have some construction trucks moving around the neighborhood, and all of that would be heavily coordinated with DOT, with stakeholders, with the elected officials, with Amazon, with UPS, with all of them, to make sure that we're not sort of crossing wires. But that's just a short period of time that our project would have a temporary impact. Otherwise, our project is not going to impede the distribution center's development, or theirs is not going to impact our project either. And those are as of right projects and centers that the two are independent. Nonetheless, like I said, regular design and construction coordination meetings, especially once we get closer to construction, would happen heavily with all these entities to make sure we're all on the same page. And lastly, similar to what I just said, construction impacts and coordination for that time. I'm repeating myself again, but just for folks that are not familiar with our DDC projects or standard procedures, our construction projects are, again, tightly and heavily coordinated with our colleagues at DOT, with many other agencies, sometimes with New York City Emergency Management, if we're coming up to a storm during construction. So a lot of agencies are involved during that process, and private properties, private stakeholders like Amazon and UPS, again, for example, residents, any of all of these groups would be involved during that process, and we'll make sure to have advanced notices. Right now, again, like I said, we don't have any construction details available. Typically, for these kind of projects, the design team who's working on the project right now they towards the end of design, that final design, once we have a clear idea of what exactly is going to be built, we start making assumptions for construction, and then that document or those list of assumptions get handed off to the contractor once they're selected after the procurement, and DDC works with the contractor, works through those assumptions, and also we set forth a lot of criteria and requirements that will make sure that is there to make sure we're reducing or minimizing the impacts to the community as much as we can. So all that is to come. There'll be a lot of opportunity for folks to give us feedback ahead of time so we know how to navigate the construction phase. So please be patient with us. Let's stick to this sort of skeleton conceptual level of 30% design for tonight, and in the next few months as well, more design details will become available, and the construction concerns and questions, we'll definitely take note of them, but we'll address those as we get closer to that time. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague Joe Menzer from ND5 Engineering. He's going to walk us through an overview of the project design. We have some cool videos to show of how this project is being envisioned in different areas of the neighborhood, and I'll come back and we can take questions after that.
Great.
Joe, do you want to share your screen? Should I stop? Or
Yeah, that would probably be the easiest.
there you go.
All right.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Oh, actually, I am not sure how to share my screen. Maybe we will have to use yours. I don't see where that's it.
There's a button on the bottom of the screen of the Zoom interface, green. It should say share screen.
I'm on an iPad, so it's maybe a little bit different from a computer.
Okay, let me see.
Yeah, it says I see a thing that says share content, but it
Yep, go
doesn't
ahead.
seem to. What's that?
Do it. And then you'll see a couple of different screens that you can share, and you'll find your screen.
Yeah, it just gives me a list of.
I can pull it back up again.
Yeah, I think you might have to. I'm just not seeing an option to share my iPad screen, just content, but it's. Sorry about that, Q.
No worries. No, just I'll keep it close eye on your slides.
Yeah,
Go
no
ahead.
worries. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to just go through. I'm going to go through 3 sections of this proposal going forward, or this presentation going forward. And the first one's about 10 slides long, and it's sort of a broad overview of the protection system that we're proposing for Red Hook, with some basic detail of the system. Then we'll stop for questions. And then there's 2 other sections I'll cover. One that's a little bit more based on science and how we ended up at the design elevation that we are proposing. And then the final section will be, as Q mentioned, some videos kind of demonstrating what the protection system might look like within the neighborhood. All right. So with that, Q, great. Let's start off, I think, by just establishing some nomenclature. I think that's important for people to understand. And I'm sure many of the folks on this phone call already understand this, but just in case anyone's not aware, there are 2 scales that we use for measuring flood protection. One is elevation off to the left in orange, and one is height off to the right in blue. So the elevation scale is based on mean sea level, and mean sea level, all that means is the average of high and low tides over a long period of time. And that average is considered elevation 0.0. And so when we look at a spot, say in front of your front door, in front of your stoop on the sidewalk, and give that an elevation of 6 as an example, that's measured to mean sea level. However, that same point at the sidewalk has a height of 0, because that's relative to you, relative to the sidewalk itself. So the point I'm trying to make is when we talk about elevation, when we talk about level of protection that has an elevation of 10 associated with it, that doesn't mean a 10-foot high wall, right? Because that's being referenced back to some point out in the harbor. What it might mean is only a wall that's about 4 feet high, but it actually provides a level of protection for sea level rise of up to 10 feet. So when we talk about storm events, we're going to talk about elevation, and then when we talk about level of protection, as it impacts the community, we're going to talk about that in terms of height. If you jump to the next slide. Perfect. So this is an overview of flooding in Red Hook. We modeled what a elevation 10-foot sea level rise event would look like in Red Hook. And pretty interesting stuff here when you look at it. You can see how much inundation there actually is in the neighborhood. Two key points to look at, and I wonder if I can draw on the screen. I cannot, maybe. Sorry, so there's two key points. Yeah, thanks, Q. So there's the Atlantic Basin area there. That is one of the lowest points in Red Hook, and a source of inundation for water coming onto property first. And if you watch the video, if you pause it even at that point, I don't know if you can see where the water comes on. One of the earlier areas is through Atlantic Basin. The second place where water comes on very quickly is down towards Beard Street. And that is also one of the lowest points in Red Hook. And if you watch the video, at least at the beginning, one more time, you can see how water is coming in there and then making its way in through the rest of the neighborhood. And so, yeah, the point here is just that we looked at those same two locations, and those are the same two locations that were identified in the previous study, the IFPS that was completed a few years back that Q alluded to a little while ago. The purple lines you see here are the recommendations that came out of that original study. They were flood protection along the coast of Atlantic Basin, and then you could see the areas along Beard Street where they were raising the roadway and putting in a flood wall. The difference here is under that earlier study, that level of protection only raised to an elevation of 8. However, that elevation of 8 was fully passive protection. That means when these elements were built out, the flood protection would be there regardless of the storm event that would have hit Red Hook, and there was nothing that needed to be deployed to provide a level of protection within a neighborhood. You can switch to the next slide. So what we did here from a lot of folks when we started off this project a couple of years ago, the second phase, I guess, if you want to look at it like that, the conceptual design being the IFPS, and now this being the actual capital project, Red Hook Coastal Resiliency, was that the 8-foot level of protection didn't seem adequate to a lot of folks in the neighborhood, and they were really looking for a level of protection that would address more storm events and be more comprehensive. And so what you see here in the dark blue line is sort of our addressing those comments and that feedback and looking for an alternative that might meet those criteria. So it's much larger geographically in reach now. There's a blue line you can see is much longer in both areas than the purple lines are. They provide a level of protection to elevation 10 instead of elevation 8. But more importantly, the level of protection at elevation 10 makes a lot of sense for what we've found with regards to the historical understanding of sea level rise in the neighborhood. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a few minutes. If you can just pop off to the next slide. Thanks. So just sort of like a summary of where we are. We started off looking at elevation 8 levels of protection and a fully passive system. And we went to look to explore elevations of protection at higher than 8. And we ended up with a system now that has a level of protection at 10. The caveat is that level of protection at elevation 10 does incorporate a number of deployable features. And we'll show you what those look like in a few minutes. It still provides that same passive elevation protection at elevation 8. You can jump to the next slide. All right, so this is just sort of like a 10,000-foot looking down overview of the level of protection system in a little more detail than just that blue line before. The yellow line here in this example is flood walls, and the orange brownish colors are raised street grades throughout the neighborhood. And as you can see, the floodwaters are still flooding the coastal regions, but they're not making their way into the neighborhood of Red Hook. And again, this model or this analysis that you're seeing is based on a sea level rise event of elevation 10. And we've circled a little couple, oh, that's fine. So similarly, there's a same sort of scenario happening down on Beer Street. The yellows are the flood walls, and the browns and oranges are raised grade. And again, you can see how the system is functioning. This is a real model that was created, and it is holding the floodwaters back when they've reached an up to an elevation of 10. It's also kind of neat to note here is that if you look off to the right, you'll see the coastal floodwaters coming in and just sort of naturally stopping without any proposed flood protection. And that's because Red Hook Park itself reaches elevations of 10 and higher. So what we ended up doing, actually flip the next slide, Q. What we ended up doing, oh, sorry, there'll be one more after this, I apologize, I don't have the order down. But I'll explain that in a second, why that's significant and why we have flood protection in those very specific places. I did want to, though, show you a couple of elements that we're using in the flood protection system. Across the top, you have fixed walls. There's a couple different types. There's the walls you actually will see in the neighborhood. Some of those yellow lines will be fixed walls that you will see. And then there are buried walls that those yellow lines do represent, but they'll be buried because we've raised the grade against them. So you don't actually see them, but they still provide a very valuable feature of slowing and stopping groundwater from flowing from sea level, from the wet side to the dry side. And then finally, we have a series of walls that are proposed in front of existing buildings. And I think Q alluded to a little earlier, the system per FEMA standards has to be totally independent. So it can't rely on other buildings within the neighborhood to provide flood protection. So if a building is to come down sometime in the future, the flood protection system will still be in place. It'll still be within the public right of way and still protecting Red Hook. And then to get, oh, sorry, if you just go back one more second, thanks you. To get to elevation 10, the bottom row indicates some of the deployable features that we're looking at using. So they would either be roller gates or flip up gates or swing gates. The interesting thing about these features is they are permanent. They are installed within Red Hook, and they get put into place very quickly. They're not stored in a warehouse and have to be brought to site ahead of a storm event and then returned to site. They can be deployed very quickly, and then they can be returned to their undeployed state very quickly as well after the storm is passed. Thanks, Q. So really what the key here to understand is that the blue again is sort of, I apologize for switching the colors a little bit up on everybody, but the blue here is that flood wall. And so it's starting up on Summit Street at the most northern end of Red Hook. It runs down along Atlantic Basin, and you can see it ends along Ferry Street, maybe just after Walcott or so. And that's because Ferry Street itself starts to rise to the elevation of 10 as you move towards Valentino Pier Park. So what we've done with our intervention is we've kind of placed the intervention in a way where it ties into existing contours within the neighborhood, therefore giving this ring of protection all around the community at elevation 10. As you get down towards the bottom of Valentino Pier Park, and as you get towards Reed Street and towards the grocery store, we drop down below elevation 10, and that's where the flood protection picks up again, and then runs its way through Red Hook Park, up to Red Hook Park, Red Hook Farms, and the Todd Triangle area by Columbia Street. Two other colors we've introduced here. There's a roller gate and a flip-up gate, and those are conceptual where they would be going, but they are at various driveways and other locations along the route. And so when they are in place, they complete the ring of protection for flood protection. And when they're down, they don't impact the movement of vehicles in and out of driveways and in and around the neighborhood. One of the other nice things about this flood protection system that you should be aware of is that we are able to build out big portions of the Brooklyn Waterfront Greenway along with it. So we are going to be incorporating that into the areas along Clinton Wharf, Ferry Street, and Beer Street as part of this project. And we have some nice renderings that show how the Brooklyn Waterfront Greenway will be incorporated shortly. And then finally, the last piece here is the Columbia Street area between Red Hook Park and Red Hook Farms. That's referred to as Todd Triangle. It's a tiny little postage stamp size green area. And as part of this project, we are going to expand that and reconstruct it and make it part of the flood protection system, and at the same time be high quality public open space for the neighborhood. Sort of a respite in an area where there's so much potential future truck movement. So this gives you a good indication of what the flood protection might look like when it's installed in the neighborhood. Off to the left, if you look at the fence line and look at the white lines that are going across the drawing, you can see if we have flooding up to elevation 8 or up to elevation 10, where that flooding would get to on the fence. And then off to the side, you can see how we've incorporated our flood walls and the Brooklyn Waterfront Greenway into the neighborhood. And the whole idea here is that it just sort of feels like it's part of the neighborhood, it's part of the fabric. You looking at the right-hand side, if you had never saw the left-hand side, you would have thought that that kind of intervention was always there. It doesn't stick out. It actually plays very nicely with what's happening in the neighborhood. If you jump to the next slide, same basic idea. This is happening at the intersection of Beard and Van Brunt Street. On the left-hand side, you can see where on the corner of the building elevation 8 and 10 would get to with flood waters. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the low levels of protection that are being put in place, low as in height, still elevation 10. But at the same time, you know, they're not obstructing the neighborhood or they don't stick out. They're sort of blending right in with what we're proposing to do and provide flood protection all at the same time. And with that, I'll take a pause. And I don't know if we want to answer some questions sort of high level about the flood protection system. And then we can dive into the details and a little bit about the science behind why elevation 10 makes so much sense for the neighborhood.
Joe, let's I think there's a lot of questions right now. Let's just go straight through and then we'll take all the questions at the end.
Okay, sounds good. All right. So
I'll play some of these videos. Yeah.
Oh, no. Okay.
You want to go?
Oh, did you skip over the, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have the videos of the proposed design right now here, and then the science section.
Okay, sorry, so just confusion between us and the order of things. So this is just a repeat of the video we saw a few minutes ago. It's just showing the flood protection system in the Atlantic Basin. And some of the key points here, other than the flood protection system, is we're going to talk specifically about some of the intersections, and we're going to show you a couple of videos on how the flood protection might look at those places. We'll start at Bound and Imlay and then work our way around the flood protection system. So it's existing conditions. These are existing conditions currently, and then this is part of our modeling system. We brought in our model. That same flood that you're seeing in the aerial view is modeled here in a first-person view. And you can see how impactful that is. And then here you see where we've installed a new flood wall and raised the entrance to the cruise terminal, what that might look like with the flood waters being held back behind us and not being able to enter into the interior core of Red Hook. So this is the one we just saw a few minutes ago. This is Clinton Wharf area. That's Pioneer and Conover, the two streets in the background, Clinton Wharf in the foreground. This is flooding coming in off Atlantic Basin and into the neighborhood. And then similarly to what we just saw a few seconds ago, this is the flood walls being installed along with raising the sidewalks and the roadways in this area, allowing the Brooklyn Waterfront Greenway to get enough space to be elevated and be built out, and at the same time providing the flood protection that's necessary for the neighborhood. So this is the other end of Clinton Wharf at the intersection of Ferris Street. And similarly, you have the same idea here, the flood waters coming in. I would also take note of the fence line that runs at the front of the sidewalk. That's a current situation. Because what we're trying to do as part of this project is hold back flood waters from making their way down into Ferris Street and into the interior core of Red Hook. We've also pushed back that fence line to the back of sidewalk and opened up the sidewalk in this area allowing us to build out the Brooklyn Waterfront Greenway directly down Ferris Street. That's the same video. There you go. Okay. And this is the last one. This is at least the last one that we have for the Atlantic Basin area. This is a shot of Ferris Street itself, looking towards Clinton Wharf now. So again, in the opposite direction, what floodwaters might look like coming off of Walcott and the various other streets as they flood through the neighborhood. On the left-hand side is the future UPS lots, or depending on what UPS does with those properties, we're not sure. And again, we've placed our retaining wall here, or our flood wall at the back of sidewalks. This is a flood wall that you would physically see as you were down in the neighborhood. And the intent would be that when that project does get redeveloped, it would get redeveloped to an elevation above that wall. So the wall would almost sort of disappear in essence. You can also see that the Brooklyn Waterfront Greenway has been added into the picture as well. That's fine. You can jump to the next one.
Sorry, there's a little lag with my slide changes. That's why it's a little tricky.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, all good. So similar to what we looked at earlier, this is Beard Street. You can see the flooding, same graphic we looked at a little bit earlier. And we're going to look at two specific locations in Beard Street, with Beard and Van Brunt and Beard and Reed. So this is Beard and Van Brunt. We'll take a look at this one first. And you'll get the idea of what the floodwaters look like, flooding in the area, going up to elevation 10. This is all based on the same model that we looked at, and how impactful and devastating they are. But I think many of you are probably aware of that. This is a unique design. You have the flood walls that are going to be facing the building, one of those particular walls we talked about earlier. We're also raising the street grades in this area to be passive at elevation 8. And then on the right-hand side of the drawing, you see a flood wall that will be bisecting some of the sidewalk. The sidewalk's actually widened in this area, though, so there's no loss in pedestrian space for movement. And then you have the rolling floodgate that comes across Van Brunt Street, stopping the water from making its way into the interior core of Red Hook. And then finally, the last video that we have to show, oh, that's the same one. There you go. The last video that we have to show is Van Brunt and Reed Street. And again, this is flooding that's coming off the Beard Street area. You see it makes it through the parking lot and into Reed Street and then back into the neighborhood. And then with the flood walls that are proposed along Van Brunt Street, and tying into a new roller gate that would go across Reed Street, we have, again, contained the water from making its way into the interior core of Red Hook.
So I pushed the science slides towards the end here in case we ran out of time, but just to take a time check. Angelica, how are we doing? I know you have a couple other things on your agenda. Should we keep going with a few more slides that we have left?
I think if you can speed through them, that would be great. So we're not keeping everybody here too long.
Yeah, I want to be mindful of everybody's time. So Joe, there's 4 slides here for science, but Joe, you can just speed present through them.
All right. Should I take for granted that everyone understands what mean sea level is, mean high water, still water level, sea level rise, and freeboard? I mean, the definitions are on the slides and we'll share them. Maybe if we can just then jump to the second slide for now and talk about what a 10-year storm means. So a 10-year storm has a 10% annual chance of occurring on any given year. And so what's really kind of interesting to note is that Red Hook hasn't actually had a 10-year storm this year or last year. And in fact, Red Hook hasn't had a 10-year storm since Sandy. That was the last time that the waters rose above the sea level associated with a 10-year storm, which is elevation 7. So it's been almost 20 years since Red Hook's been impacted by a sea level rise event greater than a 10-year storm. If you want to just jump to the next slide, I'll try to speed through these. And so that theme is pretty prevalent. All those little orange dots you see at the bottom of this graph are storm events dating back from 1927 through, I think, when the data was available and the graph was created about 6 months ago, so around 2020 or so. And in that time frame, there have only been 3 storm events that have risen above a sea level elevation of 7. And that's the 2 days associated with Sandy, and then, excuse me, Hurricane Donna in the 60s. Other than that, there has never been an event above 70 with above elevation 7 within Red Hook. And that's a 10-year coastal storm event. Just want to jump to the next slide. Actually, you can probably just jump to the last slide. So what we're designing for here is elevation 10. So that's 3 feet above what's currently a 7-year coastal, what's currently a 10-year coastal storm. And that's purposely done because we're both looking at what's happening today and what's happening into the future. So with sea level rise, a 10-year storm will become more prevalent, and a 10-year storm's elevation might increase, because right, these elevations associated with a certain storm event are associated with the probability of them occurring. So as you get higher sea level rise events, 10-year storm elevations will rise as well. And so we've built into this sea level rise of 2.5 feet and freeboard of 0.5 foot. And so that sea level rise is consistent with the New York City Panel on Climate Change's recommendations for their most conservative model for sea level rise through the 2050s, and their likely model through the 2100s. So there's quite a bit of sea level rise built into this, which would indicate that the system that we're designing and proposing is both adequate today and adequate throughout the design and useful life of the system, which is really the key point here, that we're making sure that what we're protecting when protecting Red Hook is not just for today, it's for families to be protected well into the future. And yeah, thanks to that slide there. Yeah, kind of just runs through it. And we'll stop there, right, I guess.
Yeah, sorry, I got a little choppy there. But, is there anything I missed here, Joe, with the science?
That's fine for now. Yeah, I think that if there's questions, I'll answer them. I think, but that's
cool. Thank you. So again, these materials are on the website. I saw some comments in the chat box. Everything was provided prior to last Thursday's meeting. It's all on the website. If you go to our website, you'll see right there. I think Faye circulated the links as well. Yes, some are hyperlinks that you have to click on to open the documents. Some are just typed into the website. We have some different templates for different websites. So with that, Angelica, how much time do you think you want to leave for questions? There's a lot in the chat box. We took note of all of these questions, and just so folks know, a lot of them are repetitive from last week. So we already have record of them. We're taking record of this tonight, and we'll be following up and providing responses within the next month to 2 weeks, whenever we can. We'll have to coordinate with our city team, but we'll definitely be following up and getting back to everybody, making sure that no question goes unanswered. But yeah, Angelica.
Yeah, really appreciate you taking note of all of the questions. I think let's hear from the committee members first with any questions or concerns, then we'll move to other attendees, and hopefully we can keep it short so we can get to our presentation on composting sooner than later. But I hesitate to give it an exact amount of time because I know this is a very important issue to a lot of people. So Jerry, do you want to start? I saw your hand was raised.
Okay, can you hear me? I think I unmuted myself. Thank you. Earlier in the presentation, you talked about coordination with other city agencies. There's a DEP project scheduled for approximately the same time, continuation of the water main project to the water tunnel number 3. It was on Columbia Street north of Hamilton. It's now being planned to come down. Well, it's been on the books for 10 years, and it's becoming more active now, according to our friends at DEP. And this will really screw up traffic going north or south on Van Brunt Street, one of the only two major routes into Red Hook, with the number of streets getting into Red Hook is really not exactly, it's not exactly very accessible. And I didn't hear you mention that program, that construction project. And I'm a little worried that your coordination and knowledge of what's planned for the area may not be current. In the two presentations last Thursday and tonight, there was no mention of any of the projects, just we're coordinating. And I think to get a better idea of this coordination, it would be helpful to know that you've spoken to DEP, DOT, and all of the other agencies and have a specific list of construction projects scheduled for the area, especially water tunnel number 3, and how they're going to work on that, and linking up the water main work that DDC is doing up on 6th Avenue in Park Slope, which I won't even go into, and I know DDC is aware of it. There's been numerous problems up there on that water main project, causing delays. I have no idea where the problems came from, if it was bad planning, subsoil conditions that no one was aware of. That's really not the point, but the point is the coordination that's necessary between city agencies and private individuals who may be planning work down here. I'm a little bit, even at this point, 30%, I would like to know that you really have a solid list and make that list available to the community and to the community board. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Yeah, happy to create a list of all the construction projects. We'll take that on, not a problem. If you think that our information is not current with projects that you folks are seeing out there as residents, please feel free to let us know. We're all accessible and available here to work together. I'll take this back to our DEP colleagues. Most likely that DEP project is being managed by our agency, so it won't be a problem at all for us to get the structure, schedule information, whether it's internal at my agency or with DEP colleagues. So thanks for flagging that. But yeah, we're again, construction, one moment, sorry. Construction details, we're 2 years away from our construction timeline. And like I explained before, we don't have any information on any of the details of our construction because we need to fully understand what we are constructing, what we're building, in order to be able to answer these questions and understand what streets are we going to go down to, what intersections need to be rerouted or closed, but potentially for temporary times, and also which areas will collide potentially with other projects at the time. So again, these are definitely on our radar right now, but there's not much that we can do with that at this point because we don't have a fully good grip on our own project just yet. Like I said, this is just the first step of design. So bear with us, please. And again, yes, please send us information, any updates that you folks get out there on the street day to day. You all are living there, and this is all going to impact your daily life. So definitely we appreciate the cooperation and partnership that we can have with you guys.
I think that my problem with what you just said and the fact that the DEP project is a multi-year project. It's not scheduled to start for another year to 18 months, which will collide with the proposed timing of your project. And
I understand. I totally understand, Jerry. So this won't be the first time that the city would have multiple projects in one area. And it's standard for us. This is the expertise of our agency. This is what we do. We have expert construction folks. That's not me, and that's why I can't answer these questions right now. But we do have expert construction folks at the agency that navigate through these complications and challenges. And this is where we pull those folks in to walk us through what the standard processes usually to make sure that 2 or 3 or 4 different projects are not colliding with each other and all of a sudden closing 10 city blocks to the community, as an example, obviously. So again, just bear with us. Like, we have the folks, we have the experts in our roster here at the agency, and it's DEP is another city sister agency that we have full access to. So we'll be able to answer those questions as we move along.
Yeah, Q, before you jump off that topic, I just maybe add to Jerry that we have had weekly and bi-weekly meetings specifically with the mayor's office, DOT, DEP, for better part of the last year. So we're very well coordinated. This is not a surprise to anybody.
I know it's not a surprise to anybody. My concern is that if you take a look at Park Slope, Carroll Gardens, Gowanus, or any other part of CB6, it is not, it has a better road, a better street system, and better public transportation. Red Hook, as you know, is a peninsula. There are only just so many ways in and out. And that's the problem when there are too many projects going on. And if it's going to be coordinated and the people and the businesses in Red Hook don't suffer, great. And that's all I have to say.
Angelica, I think our colleague Jessica Cullen from the mayor's office is on the call. I think she's trying to unmute herself.
Yeah, I just gave her privileges, so she should be able to do that now.
Yeah,
Perfect,
I can
thanks.
unmute, sorry. I just want to, see if I can get the button, that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. Hi.
Hi.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there anybody else from the committee that has a question or concern they want to voice? Hildegard, I know you had a lot of things in the chat box. I don't know if you want to.
Sure. So one of our major concerns is the FEMA requirement that any project that is built with FEMA funding not exacerbate an existing condition. And while this looks really wonderfully visualized, nobody in Red Hook is confident that this project will not create a bathtub in extreme storm weather circumstances. There's a difference between rainfall flooding and extreme weather flooding, and Red Hook residents are very concerned about rainfall flooding. One of the difficulties in Red Hook is that our existing sewer system is already compromised. And so the idea that we will somehow, I personally, as a licensed civil engineer, cannot imagine how this will, I believe the point you made was something like improve flooding conditions. I can't see how that's going to happen. So we in Red Hook need to see that you are aggressively addressing the rainfall flooding issues. Bear in mind that rainfall flooding issues for the entire region end up in Red Hook. Drainage from all over Community Board 6 ends up in Red Hook. And this needs to be addressed while you are doing this, not subsequently, to meet the requirements of your FEMA funding.
Thanks, Hildegard. Joe, would you be able to speak to the bathtub effect concern?
Mhm.
And I'll pick it up from there for the draining question. Drainage.
Okay. Yeah, so water that's going to flood in from the harbor is going to come in regardless, right? So this particular protection system is geared around sea level rise and coastal flooding. It's not geared towards interior drainage or rainfall events. That being said, any sea level rise event, even if that sea level rise event was to overtop the existing walls, the drainage system that's within Red Hook, the catch basins, are being located at low points, and we're regrading a lot of the interior streets along where we're proposing flood protection to make sure that any water that does make it over the wall, if any water was to do so in an extreme event, will not pond. It will make its way into the catch basins and into the stormwater system. That said, if the stormwater system itself is completely overrun, that water won't exit out of Red Hook until the sea level has gone back down. But this wall that's protecting Red Hook from 99.9% of all events is not making that condition any worse. It's keeping sea level water out, and it's regrading public streets and putting catch basins at low points to make sure that any water that does make it in is captured and being sent back out when sea level decreases.
I'm not speaking about water that would overtop the protection devices. I'm speaking to water that flows overland and enters the surface waters as non-point source, not through combined sewers, but simply overland flow. And as far as I can tell, the barrier, the protection devices would impede that overland flow in rainfall events.
That water, right, correct. So, okay, sorry, if you want, but.
Yeah, Hildegard, we this is obviously well aware this is a major concern in neighborhoods. So Red Hook, just like most of New York City, 100-year-old, 200-year-old sewer system, and I totally understand the concern and the question. This also came up last week. So we're taking all this back, coordinating with our colleagues at DEP, with the mayor's office, with different units. So give us some time to figure all this out, and we'll be able to better answer these questions on drainage.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else from the committee want to speak? Okay, we'll move on to other attendee questions. So if you have a question you want to speak, raise your hand. So first, we're going to have Jim. If you just want your question to be addressed from the chat box, we probably won't get to all of them tonight, but as the presenters noted, they will follow up with something and we'll be happy to distribute that. But if you do want something addressed immediately, the best way to do it is to raise your hand. So Jim, you are up and you should be allowed to speak.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great, yeah, thanks for having this forum again. I'm a resident of the Fairway building above the Food Bazaar. I've been here about 15 years. I also have a business here, the Look North Gallery, for about 15 years. So I have a question similar to Hildegard's. Building this wall, it seems like it is protecting some of Red Hook, but then sacrificing, quite a few others and the buildings. And it looks like the flooding, from what I could see, would get worse, more prolonged, more damage to the buildings. I would anticipate extended down utilities, sewage issues, things like that. I don't know if any studies about having that wall right north of these buildings, if that water pressure, if that does any effect to the building. But I did notice on the beginning of this, my question is the beginning of the presentation, you put up a slide called Fema eligibility criteria. Let me see, I'm pulling it up now. It says, cannot have negative impact on existing conditions or worsen flooding in other nearby locations. So maybe just more of an answer to that. It seems like that would definitely worsen flooding here behind the wall, whether it went over or not. And then if you go down a couple more bullet points on that, looks like page 10, FEMA eligibility criteria. Quantified benefits must be greater than quantified costs. So how are you calculating or quantifying the costs and the benefits? Or how do you define a quantified cost? Is it a loss of business, livelihood, potential loss of life if trapped on the wrong side of the wall? Or so I just had concerns about those same, as Hildegard did, the same FEMA eligibility criteria. It sounds like it's not meeting those, or that could be a concern. And also maybe a little more a definition about this cost benefit analysis, quantified benefits during quantified costs are my questions there. Thanks.
Sure. Hi, Jim. Thanks for flagging those. So I'll cover a couple of things, and I also saw 2 questions in the chat box that you had raised. So let me get through those quickly. And Joe, maybe you can somehow simplify how the cost benefit analysis process typically works. So as far as the flood wall being able to handle that pressure, water pressure, when it's designed up against another building or another wall, Joe can speak to the ingenuity of that, but these flood walls are designed specifically for that.
I meant more the building than the wall.
They're designed to protect anything on the other side of it. So, and let's pause there for a second, and Joe can come back to the again, engineering of the wall. But one other similar question that you had about that. Oh, if the water breaches, if this flood protection system fails for any reason, if there's a crack or something, hopefully there isn't. These things are very heavily constructed and designed. But this is why we need to make sure that we have full unobstructed access to these to the system as the owners and operators, that there's regular inspections throughout the years that go on, that they get checked and repaired before any storm comes up. So if there's any compromise anywhere, that most likely there won't be, but if there is, all of that will be caught in the annual or however frequently that the DOT folks do that, they will be able to address all that. One other question you had about construction and materials, to bring in materials through water and barge and reduce the truck traffic and burden on the streets. Totally agree with that approach. That is something that we can look into, but not right now. We have to wait until the contractor is selected. It depends on who gets selected, what kind of expertise, and maybe not expertise is not the right word, but what kind of equipment and system they have in place. What are they essentially coming to the table for this project? And we have to have that conversation with them to be able to understand how that works. And keep in mind, barging is, I'm sure you know this, most people know this, but it's not simple. There's a lot of permitting complications and a lot of coordination with other city or states or maybe even federal agencies, I'm not sure, that need to happen. So that's a very complicated conversation that we need more experts to help us through that, to figure that out.
Hugh, this needs to happen now. The contractor cannot be selected without being told that the required transportation method is marine transport. We've had this problem with Department of Parks. They select the contractor. Oh, this contractor can't do it. This needs to go into the bid documents. We can't think about it after the fact. This has to be part of the design criteria and mobilization. And respectfully to you, this is something that Red Hook has been asking for many projects. And so we cannot wait until anything. We need to see this as part of the design and build process at 30%. That's what needs to happen. Thank you very
Understood,
much.
but sure, understood. Hildegard, just we have to put this in a bigger context. We won't be able to answer the question of what is needed to be brought to the site at this point. We're still too early in the stage of this design phase to be able to answer what are you trying to bring to the construction site that we will need to bring through barge. So that question will be developed in the next several months throughout the next year of design phase. Once we have more of these design details and better understand. So let's just please put a pause on that for a second. We'll be able to answer these again as we move forward. We do have answers for, I'm happy to provide those. If we don't, we'll have to take note of it and come back to you folks, and I ask for your patience.
Okay. Just to say the barge thing, in addition to the gallery, I'm also in the maritime industry. For 30 years, I run tugboats, mostly out of Alaska now. I'm the captain on a 200-foot anchor handling supply vessel. And I've run boats out of here. So there's a lot of issues with if you think that's just going to really kind of happen quickly or overnight. So I've been in that industry for 30 years, and I have a 1,600-ton master's master of towing oceans license. And I don't see that's like I said, can't be an afterthought or something we'll work into the picture here. I mean, that's all infrastructure and contracts and a lot of issues there. So just from a maritime point of view, in addition to the gallery, like I said, I spent half my 30 days on, 30 days off on a tugboat. So I know a little about that end of things too. And I'd be interested in being involved more in conversations about that as well.
Absolutely. Like I mentioned, again, we definitely recognize there's a lot of experts and expertise and skilled forces in Red Hook. And we're really happy about that and appreciate that. So you folks flagging all this right now at this early stage is great to have on the list and on the radar. I just want to make sure that I make sure everybody is clear that I'm not trying to dismiss anybody. We just don't have these answers right now, but definitely taking note of this, and we'll take it back and be sure to follow up throughout the next year or so of the design phase with all of you, and we can sit down and talk through all of this together. And then with regards to the food bazaar protection, that's a major concern for many folks. It's come up multiple times tonight and last week and in between. I wanted to reiterate that the food bazaar itself, Fairway, back when they were there, from our understanding, they have left behind a flood protection system that's deployable in advance of a flood, and those are stop logs that are typically stored elsewhere. And once a storm is coming up, they'll be able to deploy that and use that. And we checked with Fairway's manager. I forgot the gentleman's name right now. I think it was Paul, maybe, forgive me. But a couple times last week and prior to that, and also our agency partners, emergency management, have also had a conversation with them. Our understanding is Food Bazaar has its own building scale flood protection. So just want everybody to bear that in mind, that in the event of a storm, they will be able to deploy that and protect that space because they already have that. And those are building level protections that DOB has requirements for, that the city is upgrading in multiple different arenas right now. So just want to put that out there and put that in context. Again, no need to respond to my comments. I just wanted to be able to just express that we coordinated with the Food Bazaar folks, and that's the information that we got. Quickly, just I know, again, time, be respectful of everybody's time here. Joe, if you can just quickly go back to the flood wall of how it's built and the pressure, and also a really quick simplified overview of the sort of benefit cost analysis process.
So I don't think the question was about the flood wall's capacity to hold back water. I think that's probably understood. I think the question was more about, is the flood wall going to allow additional forces against, or push additional force against the existing buildings that are within the floodplain, and then damage those buildings respectively. And so the issue here is that the strongest force of water is when it's first making landfall, right? You have the large waves coming in, they're crashing against the shore, and then they're moving in, and they're moving inland. So those are where you have the largest forces. After water's made landfall and after it moves in a bit, then there's a weight to water, right, that's associated with it, and there is some hydraulic forces from water pushing against buildings. But the elevation of that water level would be the same elevation of the water level in the harbor, right? The water seeks a single elevation. So the wall is not exacerbating flooding conditions in that location, or is the wall adding to higher sea level rises, sea level on the wet side of it. None of those two things are happening. So the wall isn't making flooding conditions worse from a sea level event. So if there was going to be damage to a building from sea level water at elevation 8 before the wall, there's going to be damage to the building from sea level water at elevation 8 with the wall in place. We're not exacerbating or making anything worse. So I think that's maybe the first comment that is that clear, or is there still some confusion? I don't know if Jim, I don't know if his microphone's still on or not.
No, I understand your answer.
Okay, great. So the second
But
part,
I was asking more about that, and particularly, the buildings, and the impact on the buildings rather than the wall. And you don't feel it would build, depending. I mean, every storm is going to have its own different characteristics, so they're probably not going to all act the same and react the same to the wall and to other buildings and how water comes in. and to the velocity and the strength that it comes in. Every storm is unique. At least that's what I've seen out there.
Absolutely. You're absolutely correct.
Thank you.
And then with regards to the benefit cost analysis, so it's a very FEMA specific requirement, and it's a FEMA program used to calculate the BCA. At some point, I assume that we'll share some of that information. You can probably go up on their website and download their requirements for the BCA, but it does take into account all types of things. So there's two pictures. So from the cost perspective, the only costs or the costs that are involved in the BCA are the capital costs for actually building the wall, the engineering costs for designing all of the flood protection systems, and then sort of the construction management, res engineering costs going into overseeing the construction, as well as the actual contractors' costs themselves. So that's all on the cost side for the wall or for the flood protection system. And then on top of that, there's maintenance. The city is required to maintain the flood protection system over its design life of 50 years. And along with that maintenance is annual inspections and then 5-year very detailed inspections of the wall throughout the design life. On the benefit side, there are all kinds of variables that go into the benefit analysis. A lot of it has to do with reducing floodwaters, and then for reducing damage and the costs associated with reducing damage. It goes into how many people were affected. It goes into loss of life. It does go into all those different aspects. And so there is a calculation done through a FEMA program for calculating that benefit. I am not a BCA expert. We have a group on our team who are BCA experts who could probably on a future call maybe detail what goes exactly into the benefit side of it and what's not eligible as a benefit. Because there are things that you might think should be a benefit, but that might not be considered a benefit by FEMA in their version of a BCA.
So the costs are just basically the kind of costs it takes to build the wall. You're not talking about costs as loss of businesses in the excluded zone and loss of revenue and livelihood, anything like that. The quantitative cost is just the cost of the project, or
that would all be on the benefit side, right? So you would say, so without the wall, businesses would be out of service for a week. With the flood protection system, they're not out of service for up to whatever storm event, or maybe they are out of service, but only for a day. And so then you get a benefit credit associated with that. So that's the benefit side of the equation.
Yeah, but the cost would be for us south of the wall or in this excluded zone. That would be the cost calculated into a cost. No, a negative impact. No,
that would not be considered part of the cost side of the equation.
Okay.
Then not per FEMA's requirements. The cost side of the equation is the actual physical construction and everything that goes into that.
So there's no cost benefit analysis how it's going to negatively affect businesses in the excluded zone south of Beard. Then that's not part of the cost benefit analysis. Is that
Jim? Business.
Well, I think that's not the correct. I don't think that's the correct correlation.
Joe, 1 second. Businesses that are ground level occupancy are impacted differently than second. I mean, you already know this, but just for reference, are impacted differently than second, third. Any business that's above the design flood elevation is considered differently than it is on the ground floor. Mm-hmm. So hypothetically, let's just look at IKEA for a second. IKEA's building on the ground level, on the street level, is all parking. So it's not really occupied space compared to the conditioned occupied space compared to the rest of the building up above the DFE, design flood elevation. So, and that's the slide that I just pulled up. Joe, feel free to jump in if I'm butchering all this, but that's where all of these technical, this is for the rest of the folks reference, all these technical aspects come into play to explain how elevation is different from height. And just because you're on the ground level doesn't mean you're at zero. That's a different elevation than it is on different heights. And Joe, if you want to clarify anything that I butchered here, feel free.
Well, I was just going to add that Jim, what you were saying is that there's a cost with you being flooded on the wet side of the wall, right? That's not being captured anywhere.
Yeah,
And so I guess the way FEMA looks at that is that if there was no flood protection system in place at all, you would still get flooded the same way. So now there's a flood protection system in place, and some portion of Red Hook, most of Red Hook, is now not going to be flooded. So there's a benefit to that side, and so that's where that
I
gets
guess I think a
captured.
lot of people aren't convinced that the flooding is going to be the same with the wall. I guess is the fact, but FEMA is, you're saying?
We've submitted everything to FEMA in draft form, and we've received relatively benign and feedback and positive, positive comments about being able to move forward into 60%.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for all the information and feedback.
Okay, I think it's probably best for the rest of the questions to be addressed by DDC via email. I see we have one more person with their hand raised. We can give you 2 minutes to express your concern, and DDC similar to 2 minutes to answer, and then we need to move on to our next presentation. So Matthew, you should be allowed to speak now and ask your question.
Hey, sorry, this is Brian. I had a question about, you mentioned the force of water and its initial press as it moves onto land. And I'm wondering if you or FEMA has considered any kind of artificial structures below the water line and off the coast itself to mitigate that storm surge force, or if that's even possible.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's definitely, we haven't. So the short answer is we have not looked at any solutions that are in water solutions that are outside of the land body for Red Hook, and really that's more than anything permitting and cost involved in a lot of those. Those are massive undertakings, but that doesn't reduce the sea level. It just reduces the force potentially of the water that moves onto the land. So, but it doesn't necessarily decrease the amount of flooding damage that you would get. The water still comes on at the same elevation because the water seeks one elevation, but it does reduce those forces that water would wash on to the property with.
And it's mostly a cost element that prevents you from investing in that, as well as the flood mitigation.
Cost and permitting to fill in.
Let me just add to it, it's not so much just cost and permitting. It's if we need to provide direct protection to Red Hook. And sorry, Joe, you're about to say something, but
That's okay.
I just want to be clear, like in terms of what you're talking about, like a breakwater or something like that, that just really breaks apart the wave a bit. The issue with Red Hook is that surge, is that sea level rise. Because Red Hook is so low and flat, there needs to be direct protection for Red Hook to reduce those flood impacts.
Right. So that's
sorry,
solving
Joe,
another
go ahead.
problem. Yeah, I was going to say, so you're absolutely right. So what those breakwaters are doing is they're solving a different problem. They're solving a problem of force, right? Of waves crashing against something waterfront and getting destroyed or getting seriously damaged. They're not stopping the sea level from rising to an elevation and washing onto land even calmly. So they're not providing flood protection.
Yeah, I understand, and thank you for the explanation. I was just wondering if we considered both issues to be central at this point, but it sounds like flooding is not.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to our next presentation. Richard, are you ready to present?
Yep, sure am.
Thank you.
All right. So 1 sec to share my screen. All right. First, thanks DDC. That was an intense presentation. This one will be a little bit more lighthearted, maybe, or not quite lighthearted. You get the idea. Anyway, hi, my name is Richard Day. I'm a community outreach coordinator at the Department of Sanitation. I'm here to talk to you today about curbside composting. All right, let's just get right into it. So curbside composting says that it is returning. It actually has returned, and you guys know that better than anyone else because it started for you about 2 weeks ago. But I'm just going to run through what exactly all this means so we're all on the same page, and then you can ask whatever questions you've got after that. Okay. So we were actually able to restart curbside composting sooner than anticipated. We thought it'd be next fiscal year, but lucky us, we are able to bring it back even sooner. And so we're trying to bring it back more efficiently. You know, a common critique of the past program was that you know, it was really expensive per ton to really get the service going. So we're trying to avoid that and try and bring that cost down. We're trying to improve our understanding of who's participating in this voluntary program. So we're requiring everyone to sign up, even if they had service previously. And we're also trying to improve our communications with you guys, with everyone who's actually composting. And so to do that, we're actually requiring everyone to provide contact information when they do sign up their building for curbside composting. When this program was suspended back in 2019, a lot of people weren't actually able to find out about it through us, at least, because we had no way of contacting them. And so in this way, we're able to actually communicate any service updates or anything else, disruptions, you know, due to storm or whatever the case is, with folks who have signed up, so we can be a little bit more in tune with you and keep you up to date of what's going on. Right, so we're requiring all residents, again, regardless of whether or not they did have service in the past, to actually sign up again. The same 44 community districts that had service previously are going to have it again. So that includes all of Manhattan, all of the Bronx, large parts of Brooklyn and Queens, and then that section on Staten Island on the North Shore. So those are all the orange areas on that map. The yellow areas or the beige areas are not going to have access to curbside composting quite yet. But they are going to have access to our food scrap drop-off sites. And so really what I'm trying to communicate here is that we want folks to sign up for curbside composting regardless of what area in New York City they live in. If you live in one of those orange areas, great, we can get you curbside composting. If you live in one of those, you know, beige areas, it can help us to you know, direct where we're opening up more food scrap drop-off sites. Okay. Why do I have to sign up? Well, I hope I covered this before, but we really want to understand who is participating and where, so that we can make sure that our trucks are full, or that they can run these efficient routes, that we're not just, you know, spending money to send a truck down 5 blocks where no one's going to be participating, right? So we'll go right from one house to the next that signed up to the next that signed up. And so the more signups in your district, in your neighborhood, the quicker service is actually going to start for you. Again, you guys know that because you have service right now, which is great. And just another note that we're going to be continuously conducting outreach throughout the city to recruit buildings, to just inform folks that this program does exist, that it is back, and this is how you actually can sign up for it and get this service. Okay. So how do I sign up? Well, this is a little bit old. It says starting in October 2021, but actually that's still true. Starting this month, and then on a rolling basis, we're going to be expanding service based on the number of signups in each community district. And I'm going to get into that in a little bit because that sounds a little funny, right? But to answer the other question, you can sign up by going to nyc.gov/curbside composting, or by calling 311 if for whatever reason you can't access the internet. And so then starting in October and each month afterwards, we're going to be adding service in those districts where we've hit that sufficient number of signups. And then if your district actually hasn't hit that number, you're going to be placed on a wait list. And we'll notify you of whether or not you're starting service, or if you're on that wait list. Again, the main takeaway here is that we really want to provide everyone with curbside composting. It was pretty widespread before, and we want to get back to that, and we want to improve on that. So we're eager to provide everyone with composting. So we are doing what we can by doing these different events. But we also want you to encourage your neighbors to sign up if you can as well. All right, so as promised, getting back to that sufficient number question. So unfortunately, there is no magic number. There's no, you need 5,000 signups in your community board to get service. And that's because it varies. That number is going to vary based on housing density and geography. So the number of buildings that need to sign up in, Midtown Manhattan or something like that is different than, Eastern Queens. Just because what we do is we look at the number of signups, the location of signups, the anticipated tonnage, a whole bunch of factors, and then we determine where we can actually run these efficient routes. And so more signups really helps all of those factors. And so that's why that's the quickest, easiest way to get service in your area. Okay. Why compost? I'm sure all of you guys already know, but food scraps, food soiled paper, and yard waste comprise a third of all the trash that New Yorkers throw out. So back in 2017, we did a waste characterization study that showed that 34% of household waste is actually compostable material, organic material, right? And so that right now is just getting trucked or barged or railed out to landfill, sitting there, rotting, releasing methane, which is contributing to climate change. Instead, we want to keep that material and process it and turn it into compost and put that to good use instead of just spending money to harm the environment, essentially. So by composting your food scraps, you're actually helping us to keep your neighborhood clean and healthy. Your food scraps are going to be in these really secure brown bins instead of in those really flimsy black garbage bags that get torn open by someone walking by or some animal that smells some food in there. And so they're in the secure bin. So even if they get tipped over or knocked over, or those pests know that there's food in there, they're not going to be able to access it. So you're helping to reduce rodent and pest activity. You're helping to reduce street litter. And then, as I mentioned, you're also helping to make New York City more self-sufficient and resilient. We're not sending that waste to landfills. We're actually creating compost out of this material, and we can even create clean energy out of it. If you're not familiar with the bottom photo, those are the digester eggs out at the Newtown Creek wastewater treatment plant. What happens is we can add food waste to there, and it'll undergo anaerobic digestion, create this gas which we can actually use to power homes. So your food scraps can really do some amazing things, or they can do some harmful things. Those are sort of the two options you have. I just want to clarify what can actually go into your brown bin. So generally speaking, it's food scraps, food soiled paper, and leaf and yard waste. So what does that actually mean? That means fruits, veggies, processed foods, oiled foods, meat, bones, and dairy can also go into your brown bin. A lot of food scrap drop-off sites don't accept those materials, so a lot of people think you can't put that into your brown bin. You totally can. We operate on an industrial scale, so a very large scale. And so our compost piles, or windrows, really have no problem processing that material, whereas a mid-scale or a small-scale site like a community garden or like a backyard operation would take a very long time to break that stuff down, if it even could. Food soiled paper, so that means any paper plates, any dirty paper plates or napkins, coffee filters, tea bags, even dirty pizza boxes, like food stuck on them, that can go into your brown bin. If you really want to impress your friends, you can put the food soiled part of the pizza box into your brown bin, and then the clean part of the pizza box with your paper and cardboard recycling. Leaf and yard waste is really straightforward. If you have a house plant or you have some plants in your backyard, you do some trimming, that can go into your brown bin. All of these materials can go into the same brown bin. There's no need to have like one bin for food scraps and one for yard waste. They can all go into the same bin. I want to take a minute here to clarify some more things for you about what can and can't go into your brown bin. Plastic bags are totally okay to put into your brown bin. That sounds crazy. It sounds like a lie, but it's not. That used to be the case, but it isn't anymore. Basically, all of our processing facilities have machinery, depackaging machinery, that's able to separate out the organic waste from those bags. So there's no need to go digging through your brown bin to pull those bags out. There's no need to scold your neighbors if you see them using a plastic bag. It is a-okay to put in there. Some things that you cannot put in there are human and animal waste. So no feces should go in there. Even if you use corn-based cat litter, that should still not go into your brown bin. No hygienic products, no dirty diapers, no like foam or like a glass bottle also shouldn't go in there. Stick to food scraps, food sold paper, and leaf and yard waste, and you'll be fine. A little simple saying that might help is if it grows, it goes. But we have a whole bunch of outreach materials in a wide variety of languages in case you or your neighbors do need some additional help. Okay. All right. This is another big thing. If you live in an apartment building, and so we define that as a building with 10 or more units, you can still sign up for curbside composting. The only difference here is that we need your building management to actually be on board with it. So I'll run you through a scenario. You live in a building with 100 units. You want to sign up for curbside composting. So you go to nyc.gov/curbside composting and you sign up. What'll happen next is us, my team or one of our customer service agents will reach out to you to ask for that building management contact information. And then we'll reach out to them and we'll say, hey, someone in your building, and we won't name names unless you want us to for some reason, someone in your building or people in your building are interested in curbside composting. This is what curbside composting is. And we sort of run through this whole spiel with them, and then we see if they're interested in signing up. So basically what will happen is we'll have that conversation for you about getting curbside composting to your building. You're more than welcome to do the same yourself. But just know that that's what we do if you as a tenant in one of those buildings sign up. To clarify, building management means property manager, managing agent, building owner, superintendent, or a condo or co-op board. Okay, so if any of them sign up, you're good to go. Not really relevant to you, but small buildings in Manhattan and the Bronx can also sign up. It's just kind of a funny note based on how the program used to operate. People are a little bit confused about that, but any residential building in New York City can sign up for curbside composting. As can nonprofits, community organizations, agencies, institutions, community gardens. As long as you receive DSNY service for your trash, you can sign up for curbside composting. If you're not sure if you qualify or not, sign up anyway. We review all of the different signups that come through. And so we'll contact you and we'll let you know, sorry, unfortunately, you're not able to get this, or like, yeah, sure, you get this, and follow up with what the next steps are. Okay, so if you're not sure, sign up anyway. We'll deal with it and we'll let you know. Okay. Oops. Great. So after you sign up, our customer service team is going to let you know when service actually starts in your district, and they're going to make sure that you have everything that you need in order to actually start service. So that means bins and signage and whatever other information that you need, like your start day and regular collection day. You must use our brown bins. That's still a requirement for this program. And then just like trash and recycling, we're going to be collecting this on a regular schedule. It will be once a week collection, and your collection day may not be what it was in the past, but we'll let you know when you do sign up, this is what your collection day is. So be nice and clear. And if you ever forget, you can check on our website as well, or call 311 and we'll let you know. So if you still have your old bin, that's great. We want you to keep using it. But if you do need a new bin, we can provide you with one. If it got lost or stolen, or you never got one, we're going to ask you if you have bins when you sign up, or if you need them. If you do need them, we'll deliver them to you in the 2-3 week period after you've been notified that you'll be starting service and your actual service start date. So we'll deliver them directly to your home. If you need bins, if you're just signing up for the first time, you didn't have any bins, you request to, you're a large apartment building, and then it turns out you need a third, that's also fine. You can just go on our website and request an additional one, and we'll deliver that to you. And again, all of this is completely free. And the program is completely voluntary, in case anyone is confused about that as well. How do I find out if I'm eligible? Well, lucky for all of you, you're all eligible. You live in the orange area, so not much of a point in going over this. But again, we have a map on our website. All the orange areas or the darker orange areas are eligible. All of the lighter ones are not at this time, but we still want folks to sign up so that we can plan for future expansions and where our food scrap drop-off sites should go, or where we should try and open additional ones. So until service does start in your neighborhood or in your building, we still want you to compost. If you're lucky enough to have a backyard and you're feeling adventurous, you can give backyard composting a try. It's great, more power to you. Most people aren't going to have that option, and so they'll be using our food scrap drop-off sites, like I've mentioned a number of times at this point. So you'll go to nyc.gov/drop-food-scraps for a map. That looks just like this. You've got over 150 throughout the city, so maybe you don't have one down the block from you at home, but there's one right up the block from where you work, right? So that's the idea, is that it's not necessarily right at your door or in your building, but it's hopefully on your way to work or, you know, the gym or on, you know, errands or whatever else the case is. So, just note before you go, please check the website, click those little green dots where you're planning on going. Those are each different food scrap drop-off sites. Confirm that it's actually going to be open when you're planning on going there, and confirm that they accept the materials that you're trying to drop off there. Nothing is worse than, you know, showing up and finding out that it's closed for the day, or that they don't actually take what you just lugged all the way from home. So just want to make sure everyone is aware of that. And if there aren't any food scrap drop-off sites near you, or you want to open up another one, you feel really passionate about this, you can go to on.nyc.gov/host-a-drop-off, fill out a form. We'll get in touch with you, make sure that you have all of the supplies, information, support that you need in order to actually operate one of these sites. All right. And of course, all of this, well, not all of it, but a lot of it is just to produce this compost, right? And of course, folks love free compost. So you can get free compost from the Department of Sanitation. We're not doing our large DSNY hosted givebacks right now, but we are still working with community groups and elected officials to host compost givebacks. So if you're interested in learning more about those, you can go to nyc.gov/getcompost. All right, and just some quick reminders before we go. There are multiple ways that you can line your brown bin, which we highly suggest doing, because they help to keep your bin, neater, keep smells down, keep things from sticking to the side or freezing to the side in the winter, and it even makes it easier for us to service. So you can use a clear plastic bag, like you would for your regular metal, glass, plastic, and paper recycling. You can use a compostable bag if you'd like, or you can use a paper bag, like a paper lawn leaf bag or like a Trader Joe's bag or something like that. You also don't have to line your bin if you don't want to. Like I said, we just highly encourage it because it makes things easier on you and it makes things easier on us. And then the last reminder is to actually place your brown bin at the curb for collection. A lot of folks have those kitchen containers like you see on the right side, those small 1-gallon containers that you might have gotten when we first rolled out to you. Don't put that onto the curb. That won't get collected or it'll go missing probably. But even if your bin is only half full or something like that, we still want you to set it out. We still want to know that you're participating. Okay, so please just place your brown bin on the curb for collection. And that's all I've got for my presentation, so I'm going to stop sharing. But if folks do have questions, I am here to answer them.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? Suzanne?
Yes, I just wanted to thank you for reminding me that I have to put the compost out tonight. I have forgotten to do it the last 2 weeks because it's not my normal garbage goes out on Thursday. So it's very confusing. So thank you for reminding me.
You're very welcome. I'm glad to hear that you're participating. Yeah, we actually did that intentionally so that it was easier for our sand workers to actually spot these bins. So that's why it's doesn't fall on your other days. So sorry about that.
Not a problem.
Jerry? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I realize I'm about to ask a question or make a point that involves DOS's budget. When the composting first came out, most households received, or at least in the brownstone neighborhoods of CB6, received in the mail from DOS cards and informing them of composting and what it meant and what can be composted and so on. Is there any possibility that that could be done again to get more people to sign up again?
So we did send a mailer to all eligible addresses when we were first bringing the program back. So all households in that in those orange areas should have gotten a mailer saying curbside composting is coming back. Here's how to sign up, or here's what to look out for. Because we actually had like a pre-sign up link, sign up to be notified, and so that's what we sent out along with that that flyer or that mailer. So yeah, we did send that out to all folks who are eligible.
Well, okay, I will not blame you then. I'll go after my local post office. Never got one.
I'm sorry to hear that.
But that's not you. That's our USPS, and that's a whole nother subject for a whole nother week to discuss. Thank you.
No problem. I'll just say, I did mention earlier, we are continually doing outreach events throughout the city, including in CB6, to raise awareness in case folks, like yourself, didn't get that mailer or have been living under a rock for a while or whatever the case is. So if any of you know of any events that are coming up or would like to have us, present at your building or, something along those lines, please reach out, let me know. We're always looking for more events to attend to help get the word out there. We are, talking to community boards, talking to elected officials, talking to community groups and things like that, but we can't, sometimes we miss things. So if you have any events or anything else, please feel free to share.
I too am really glad that this is going on again. My compost bin was stolen years ago, and then I received an email and I never got a replacement. I put in so many requests, never got a replacement, but now I do have a replacement, which is amazing. So I'm really excited about that. I have two different questions. One is about facility for collecting the compost and processing it. Is the only facility at Newtown Creek. And I know there was some, I don't know if this was true, but there were some issues with controlling rat populations as it relates, and that being one throughout the city.
You broke up for that second question a little bit, but the first question about if Newtown Creek is the only place that we're processing this stuff is no. We also use the Staten Island compost facility. We actually did a tour. Actually, it was exactly 2 years ago today, where I got to stand next to that large depackaging machine and tell people all about why they can use plastic bags now. So we also have that facility within the city. And I'm sorry, could you repeat that second question? It was something about rats.
Yeah, not important. I'll ask a different question.
Okay.
Is there any possibility of this being rolled out, like public trash bins, like on the streets? I know, like where there is DSNY collection, I think a lot of New Yorkers eat while they're walking around, and a lot of food gets into our trash bins.
Yeah, I think that would be a great thing. Of course, anytime you're opening something up entirely to the public, you're going to run into issues like people have this, bottle that they've been carrying around and, oh, great, there's a bin right over here. Let me put it in there. So there are some things that would have to be taken into consideration like that to try and prevent those sorts of issues from occurring. But I think that would be great if we can get to a point where we're able to do that. I think first, though, I'd rather, or hopefully we get to a point where everyone in the city actually has access to curbside, is my personal hope. But yeah, it'd be great if we could do that. I think that's definitely going to be a long-term goal for us.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Any questions from other attendees? All right, I think that's it for tonight then. Oh, sorry, wait, one quick question from Judy. Go ahead, Judy.
So what about the brown bags for garden waste? Can you put them out next to your brown bin?
Yep, you certainly can. Any additional yard waste that you have that doesn't fit to your brown bin, you can set out in a paper, lawn, and leaf bag like what you're describing, or you can use an unlined rigid container. So if you have, say, like a 40-gallon trash pail, you can put it out in there. It helps us if you can put one of those yard waste only stickers on the front of it. But those, you're also, yeah, you are able to use those paper, lawn, and leaf bags. Just set them out right alongside your brown bin.
Okay, and one other question, that is, if we're told that our pickup is on Monday, does that mean we set things out Sunday night for whatever time a garbage truck comes around on Monday?
Yep, that's exactly right. You'd set it out.
The night before?
Yep, for
Okay,
collection
thank you.
in that day, or yeah.
Thank you. So glad you're coming back.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Marissa.
Hey, sorry, actually it's Jackie Painter, but I might be logged in as Marissa Preffer. I just had a quick question. This presentation was great, and you mentioned that you're available to come to any community events. This might be an entirely different department, obviously, but do you guys ever come to? We have a lot of youth programs here in Red Hook. Would you guys be open, or is there a certain department that I could maybe get in touch with for compost information out to our various youth organizations?
Yeah, sure. So I would encourage you to go to on.nyc.gov/event request, and I can put that in the chat as well. I'll do that right now, actually, before I forget to. On.nyc. Sorry, one second. I can't talk and type at the same time. Right, that should be it. You can go there and you can request us to come out to an event or whatever else you'd like. Now, there's a whole bunch of different options in this drop-down menu. So submit a request that way. That's the best way to do it. Okay.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome. If that's it, I'll take a quick second to plug some stuff that we have. So we do a weekly webinar about curbside composting. It's really aimed at large apartment buildings, so buildings with 10 or more units. But if any of you have a resistant landlord or whatever else, I'd encourage you to send them to this webinar. If you go to on.nyc.gov/DSNY, all caps, and then webinar, lowercase, they can sign up for it. Or if you go to, yeah, that's the best way to go there. So we do that on a weekly basis. So if anyone's interested or has any questions, that's a great way to sort of expose them to it and get those questions for them answered. Okay. I think that's it. But thank you very much for having me. I hope you all found this informational and useful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
You too.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, good night.
Good night.